Welcome students to the series of lecture on fixed income. And in this series of lecture of fixed income, in the last session, we discussed the valuation of corporate bond. And there we introduced, in the valuation of corporate bond, we introduced a very important concept of credit spread. And today we are going to discuss the topic of spread duration, which is related to the concept of credit spread. Let's wait on this slide for like 30 seconds. What we said in the last session that if you're trying to value a corporate bond, the required rate of return is not only the risk-free rate as it is in the government bond, it is a risk-free rate plus something. And that is called as credit spread. This is the extra that you're charging from a corporate bond or a corporate because you're taking a risk. The risk is the risk of default. A corporate can default, a government cannot default. And that's why you're charging that extra 3%. Now, we also discussed to calculate that 3%, we'll need two components. One is the probability of default of the corporate and the loss given default. If you know these values, then you can calculate the credit spread. For example, if the probability of default is 80% and loss given default is 20%, then PD into LGD is going to give you the credit spread. For example, if the PD is say 5% and LGD is say 6%, then PD into LGD is going to give you the answer for the credit spread. Okay. So that's what we discussed in the last session, that in your BA2 plus calculator or your required rate of return for a corporate bond is going to be risk-free rate plus the credit spread. So we have established in the last session that the required rate of return, the required yield from a corporate bond is the risk-free rate RF plus a spread, a credit spread. It could be 3%, 4%, 5%, 10%, depending upon the credit quality of the firm. Okay. Now, we know that the risk-free rate, which is the nominal risk-free rate in the market, the interest rate in the market can change. So there are two components, required return, and you are saying risk-free rate is a component and the credit spread is a component. We know that the risk-free rate will change in the market. And if the risk-free rate change in the market, the bond price will change. Why bond price will change? The bond price will change because price and the interest rate in the market has an inverse relationship. But in this required rate of return, now there is another component that is credit spread. The credit spread can also change. And if credit spread will change, will it affect the bond price? Yes, it will affect the bond price. Why? Because the equation of the valuation is not changing. The value of a bond is equal to cash flow 1, which is the coupon, divided by 1 plus required rate of return. Now, this required rate of return has two components. One is the risk-free rate, another is the credit spread plus cash flow 2 upon 1 plus required rate of return upon 2. Again, it has two components, the risk-free rate and the credit spread. So and so forth, cash flow n divided by 1 plus required rate of return raised to the power n, and this required rate of return has two components. Still, the bond price is inversely related to the required rate of return, and required rate of return has two components, RF and credit spread. Now, the credit spread could be 3%, 4%, 5%, whatever it is, but still, can I say that the price of a bond has an inverse relationship with the credit spread because the price of the bond has an inverse relationship with the required rate of return, and required rate of return has two components. One is the risk-free rate, which is the interest rate in the market, and the credit spread. So if the credit spread will increase, the price of the bond will fall. If the credit spread will fall, the price of the bond will increase. And it is also intuitive because when I'm saying credit spread is decreasing, it means that the credit quality of the firm is increasing. If the credit quality of the firm is increasing, you will start perceiving that bond as a good bond and the price of the bond will rise, right? Or if the credit spread widens, it means the credit quality of the firm is decreasing. And if the credit quality of the firm is decreasing, you will start perceiving that bond as a bad bond. And that's why the price of the bond will fall. And that is what is written here. If the credit quality deteriorates, the spread will increase because you will demand extra, more extra. The total required rate of return or the yield that you're demanding from the bond will increase and the price of the bond will fall. And if the credit quality improves, the spread will fall, yield will decrease, and the price of bond will rise. And there are multiple factors because of which the credit spread will rise or fall. It could be the management quality, it is the profitability in that quarter or that year, it is the kind of the capital structure. Is the firm taking a lot of liability or not? What are the different business strategy they are entering into? What are the different kinds of merger and acquisition they are doing? And yes, definitely the industry and the macro condition. If you all are in war, the credit spread of all the bonds will increase. So can I ask you, tell me the sensitivity of the bond price due to credit spread? The way I asked you in the duration session of this series of lecture of fixed income, hey, can you tell me the sensitivity of the bond price with respect to interest rate? And you said, yes, we can calculate that. Similarly, we have to calculate the the sensitivity of the bond price with respect to credit spread. So we are talking about the sensitivity of the bond price due to credit spread. So can I say if the duration was on an average percentage change in the bond price due to 1% change in the interest rate, there should be a measure of sensitivity for spread, which we can call as spread duration, which is on an average percentage change in the bond price due to 1% change in credit spread only. It is identical to duration, but the change comes from credit spread, not the interest rate in the market, not the risk-free rate in the market. So, what do you have to do? If I'm saying it is on an average percentage change in the bond price due to 1% change in credit spread, how would you calculate it? You will give shock to the credit spread, not the interest rate. Assume there is a bond which has the face value of 1000, coupon 6%, coupon frequency annual, maturity 3 year, risk-free rate 7%, and credit spread as 3%. If you have to find the spread duration, what you will do? You will change the spread to 4% and 2% and recalculate the bond price. And then you will try to observe the change. So, won't it be very similar to the formula that we derived for duration, which was P2 minus P1 upon 2 P0 del Y? Instead of del Y, I would write del S, right? So, what would be P2? P2 is when the spread decreases. So I'll give a shock of 1%, and that would be P2. Then for P1, I'll recalculate the bond price. P naught is the price at the initial spread, and I'll put down the value in this BA2 plus calculator. So let's try that. So my required rate of return is 10%. For 3%, for 2%, it would be what? 9%. For 4%, it would be what? 11%. So my I by Y will only change and all the different characteristics of the bond will be identical. So let's do the calculation. Second clear work, second clear TVM, 1000 FV, PMT is 63 is N. I by Y is 7 plus 3, that is 10. Compute PV. This is my P naught, which is the initial price. So 900 is my initial price. So P naught is 900. Now I will give shock because I have calculated this price as 10%, which means the credit spread is only 3%. Okay, let's try to decrease the credit spread to 2%. So the net I by Y is what? 9%. So I'll do 9 I by Y compute PV. I'll get 924.06. 924.06. This is my P2. For P1, I have to give shock to the credit spread in the upward direction, and it will decrease the price. I by Y 11, compute PV 877. P1 is 877. The rest is what? Of P2, that is 924.06. P1 is 877. P naught is 900. Del S is 0.01. And you calculate your spread duration. Assume the spread duration comes to say 5. What is the interpretation? The interpretation is if the credit spread changes by 1%, then the bond price will change by 5% on an average. Very similar to duration, but yes, it is important to understand spread duration because the credit quality of the firm changing impact the price of the bond, and that sensitivity has been discussed extensively in FRM Part 1, Part 2, CFL Level 1, and CFL Level 2. And that is the reason we have invested the whole session on spread duration. Okay, with that, I'll pause here. Thank you. Have a nice day.